What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here, and in this video, I thought it would be fun to rank the worst exotic armor pieces in the game. One thing to note is that this list is primarily focused on PvE, but with that being said, these exotics also don't do shit in PvP either, they're pretty much just trash. And one more thing I want to note is this list was made at the start of May, so any future TWAB stating exotic changes won't be taken into account as I don't have a crystal ball. So these exotics could be seeing some buffs in the final shape, and honestly, I hope they do get buffed. Or Bungie may just leave them be and let them collect dust in the vault. So with that out of the way, let's jump into it. At number 10, we have Skull of Dire Ahamkara. I was out for a run a couple weeks ago and I thought of an awesome build. I had made a fun build with Vesper of Radius and Stormdancer's Brace for Onslaught, and I thought, what if I did that but with Void? So I used Nezarec's Sin and then I would swap over to Skull of Dire Ahamkara to cast my super. Sadly, the super returns that this thing gives are pretty pathetic these days. They need the Shards of Galanor treatment. Shards gives extra super energy for melee kills, so maybe we could let grenade kills count for extra super energy with this exotic, and then let it return super on hit or kills. Like, Shards gives you back energy for using it for ad clear or single target damage, but Skull of Dire Ahamkara you have to get kills with. I was very disappointed with how the build performed, and it made me sad because back in the days of the Reckoning, this thing was meta, but we've come a long way since then. Also, they really need to buff Nova Bomb in the final shape. The damage should roughly be on par with Needlestorm in my opinion. Or maybe this exotic could also get the Cuirass of the Falling Star treatment and make your Nova Bomb hit harder. I'm not too sure. At number 9, we have Crest of Alpha Lupi, a true relic of the past. It gives health back when you put down a shield and generates an additional orb of power from your super. I remember using this back in the day with the Bubble Titan to chain bubbles with my teammates in Trials, but even then it was only a swap exotic. It could be brought up to today's standards by letting your class ability grant restoration ×2 instead of just a health bump, and also have Reaper built in or something so that you don't need to run the mod, and maybe give you 2 barricade charges. I don't know, but it certainly needs some help and does not hold up to today's standards for exotics, but since it came out with the launch of Destiny 2, that's pretty much understandable. At number 8, we have Raiju's Harness. So Bungie likes to do this thing where they just slap on a ×4 weapon boost to a bunch of different exotics. They did it with Mantle of Battle Harmony, Icefall Mantle, and Eternal Warrior. But this one is the worst because it requires your super to get that bonus. This exotic allows your Arc Staff to drain more slowly and you can cancel it like Chaos Reach to preserve some super energy. But none of that is all that useful. The most useful part of this exotic is the blind that it gives you. And even then, exotics that really only help your super better be damn strong. Like Cuirass of the Falling Star or Star Eater Scales are really good because they buff the hell out of the damage. If they're not, then they won't see use. And Raiju's definitely doesn't see a lot of use. At number 7, we have Claws of Ahamkara. This grants 2 melee charges and has heavy-handed built into it intrinsically. So on the surface, this is not a terrible exotic, but when you look at the Warlock melees, you quickly see why it sucks. Incinerator Snap is pretty much the only good Warlock melee unless you use the Arc Aspect Lightning Surge, which is good in Crucible. But for the most part, this exotic just suffers because Warlock melees are just not very good. And if you do build around a Warlock melee, then Felwinter's Helm, Necrotic Grip, or Winter's Guile are just far superior exotics. Next up, in the number 6 slot is MK44 Standicides. When the hell is the last time you even heard anyone talk about these? They came out in Curse of Osiris, so over 6 years ago, so let me remind you what they do. They grant you an overshield when you're sprinting at full health when you have a shoulder charge melee equipped, and also if you're running Ballistic Slam, and then hits with the ability recharge a portion of your melee energy. Now that is all well and good, but Peregrine Greaves gives you your whole shoulder charge back if you hit a mini boss or champions, and it also buffs the damage to the point where you can one-shot most champions in the game. So why then would you run these? Hint, you wouldn't. The small overshield is not worth it. These definitely need a rework in some type of way for sure, as they are just a way worse version of Peregrine Greaves. At number 5, we have Sealed Ahamkara Grasps, another exotic you have heard no one talk about. These are from Warmind, and they state dealing damage reloads your currently equipped weapon. Charged melee final blows reload all weapons, and then it gives a large benefit to airborne effectiveness and movement speed and jump height after dealing damage with your melee. So is this useful? No. People aren't running this in Crucible to get the movement speed and jump height, and as far as reloading your weapons, let me read you something. Damaging targets with a stasis melee reloads your stowed weapons and grants you a temporary boost to weapon ready speed. This is the Stasis Fragment Whisper of Impetus, and even though it says stowed weapons, it actually reloads all of your weapons. There is a slight cooldown with it, but still, it gives the same effect and it's only a fragment, where Sealed Ahamkara Grasps is an exotic, and it isn't even as good because you don't get a boost to handling speed. So yeah, even though these got the AE buff and movement speed and all that stuff, they need to be more useful. Making it at least as good as Whisper of Impetus would be a good start. At number 4 we have Prometheum Spur. This allows you to make healing and empowering rifts when you get kills with your Dawnblade super. And then when you get a kill when standing in a rift, it consumes your rift energy and places it where the dead enemy is. Do you know how annoying that is in PvE? To have your rift energy snatched away because you got a kill? I remember this distinctly. These came out in Season of the Dawn, and I Am Cool Guy did a video of him using them effectively in the Crucible. And I mean, a dual empowering and healing rift is pretty strong in PvP, but if you kill a guy out in the open, running to the rift fully exposed is still a good way to die, especially in something like Trials. Now think of doing this in a GM. Yeah, not a good idea. And on top of this, now you don't have a rift to place down and cover where you're actually standing. So it's a pretty useless exotic. It needs a complete rework in my opinion. Maybe getting a kill in a rift can give more rift energy like it does, but then it also gives Resto and Radiant or something. That would actually be really good and strong and bring it up to today's standards of power. Now we are in the top 3, and here we have Gwizinvest. This could easily be number 1, as who the fuck uses Spectral Blades in PvE? But if you are going to, then this would be a decent exotic to run, as it extends the duration of your Spectral Blades super. This used to be a menace in PvP, and you could go literal minutes with your super in the Crucible. It was a terror. Sadly, we can't make it that strong anymore for the sake of PvP balance, so now we just have a watered down super based exotic. And like I said with Raiju's Harness, if it is going to be an exotic that only benefits your super, it has to be really strong, and this just isn't. Both forms of Tether are just too good in PvE to run on Void Hunter to make it worth running Spectral Blades. But if the super gets a buff and it gets more of a rework, then maybe you might see people running it someday. They could make it like Doomfang Pauldrons but for Spectral Blades, but until then, it's one of the worst exotics in the game. At number 2 we have Blight Ranger. This often memed exotic is memed for a reason. It sucks. It's funny though, because in the final shape, there's probably going to be some small use case for this and I'll have to eat my words. That is because this exotic is extremely niche. Blocking with your Arc Staff reflects the damage back and deals greatly increased damage, but this is only good on things like Ogres, which shoot their Eye Blast in a constant wave of damage, or maybe Shriekers too. It also does make orbs for your teammates as you reflect damage, but look through the entirety of Destiny 2, and there is basically no use cases where a boss just deals a constant stream of damage. Therefore, you get little benefit out of this super. And then when you think of the fact that you could just throw on Gathering Storm and then deal damage with your weapons in a boss phase instead, then it's like, why would I run this? For starters, I think they pretty much just need to combine Raiju's Harness with this, and totally rework one or the other. And then when they're done that, they still need to buff it in some other way to make it usable. But as it stands right now, there's just very few use cases where this can shine. And because it is tied to the super, you already have low uptime on it. So yeah, it gets the number 2 spot. In the other top 10 videos that I've done, I would give an honorable mention category, but for this video, I was honestly hard pressed to find 10 really bad exotics. I love build crafting, and I can usually find a way to make most exotics work. And even with the ones on this list, you can still make some of them somewhat okay. So I just want to give props to Bungie for keeping up on the exotics and keeping them mostly viable in some way. Granted, some are pretty niche or don't have all that much power, but they're still usable. They've done a great job reworking them over the years to bring them up to today's standards. The Aeon gloves are a great example. They were useless for years, and now they have some pretty good viability, and same with many others. So yeah, props to the folks at Bungie. Anyways, on to number 1. So with how bad the last 2 were, you must be thinking, damn, what could be number 1? Well, probably like the rest of the community, you probably forgot this piece of shit existed, and that is Arbor Warden. And honestly, it pains me to say it's crap because clearly a ton of time and effort went into the creation of this exotic. The exotic color changes based on your subclass, and the Baronade animation obviously had a ton of care that went into it. The design team went hard with this one. But I'm sorry to say, the Sandbox team dropped the ball. When this exotic came out, I made a review on it and I basically said it's useless, and that video had a like to dislike ratio of 51.6%. That is by far my lowest on any video, as I'm usually in the high 90s, like 97 plus. And go check out the comments on that video. So many people flaming me and saying I don't know what I'm talking about, but you know what? A year later, I've seen this exotic out in the wild once, in one game of quick play PvP. That is the only time I've ever seen it used, and I play this game quite a bit. Sure, it has very niche use cases for grabbing a res in trials or something, and it can work with Dranger's Lash for suspending enemies further away, I guess, but Abeyant Leap does that way better. And know what else works better in trials that is better than throwing a barricade for a res? Just killing the enemy team, which lots of Titan exotics help you do much better, like One-Eyed Mask or Dune Marchers or ACDO Feedback Fence. Hell, Citan's Ramparts lets you get the res and shoot the bad guys through the barricade. But I'm saying now what I said back then, that this is a gimmick exotic with no practical use cases. You can use it for fun, you can even make some goofy plays with it, I'm sure, but that doesn't make it good. I have fun with lots of underused and underpowered exotics, but I know when I am using them that I could be using something better. I'm all for having fun in the game, but I also recognize when things are just objectively good or bad. And again, I do want to say I love the attention to detail that went into the making of this exotic, so give it a buff and make it usable. Let the barricade synergize with your subclass. So when you throw the barricade, it can apply volatile and weaken, or scorch and gives radiant or resto, or makes a fire sprite, unravels and severs, slows and makes a shard, jolts and blinds. Yes, this sounds very potent, but even with that potency, there are so many exotics that I would use over it. But if it could do those things, then it would at least be viable. Anyways, that is going to do it for the video. If you're still watching, then thanks so much for watching to the end. It means a lot. And if you want to see more ranking videos like this, check out my weapon ranking videos or the ones on the best exotics on each class. And don't forget to leave a like and hit subscribe. Thanks for watching and take care.